I might have shared that my childhood and education was not so successful. I could hardly read when I left school at age 15. And so now looking back, I recognise the importance of reading. Reading is like the key and the platform for all other learning areas. And so many of our children are struggling with reading today. And so I want to help you with a little snapshot to make sure that whatever reading experiences your children have with you in this home education season is beneficial, is positive, and certainly should not be a bad or negative memory. Memories of reading for me in my family life really was enough to turn any person off reading. In fact, I probably blamed reading for a lot of this very negative relationship I had in my own family. I don't think my father would even mind me sharing. I remember him very cross with me one day when he was helping me with the book that was sent home from school. "You read this. By golly, I left school, I couldn't read. You're not going to be like me. You're going to learn to read." And all that did was turn me off reading, honestly. Now, I'm sure very few of us would do that, but we might not say it in our words, but it can also happen if we're sharing a book with a child or something they're meant to be reading to us. Just to once again, our tone. We can express meaning that is not in the words, literal words, but is in the tone of our body language and how we phrase things. I'll give you an example. I sometimes sit with readers that are at-risk readers between the age of 7 and 17, sometimes 15-year-olds that are supposedly dyslexic, that have never been able to read a chapter book. Many of these students, actually, it's because I come from that background myself, it's a strength I have in helping them. And the biggest thing I often find in that situation is the students are struggling with anxiety around reading, and reading to other people is a spooky, scary experience for them, and their brains half shut down. There's a lot of other things that happen, which I won't go into the detail of, that cause these issues, but I really enjoy turning these readers around in a very short space of time, working one-on-one with them. However, I do a little activity. We often say to the student, if they're above age 12, I say, so when mum's reading with you, or when the teacher aide is reading with you, and they're saying, "You're doing well, you know that word," but you're stuck on the word, and you just can't seem to get that word to come out of your mouth. And they're saying, "You have read the word on the last page. It sounds like," I said, "What are you hearing? What is the message that is telling you?" And the student, I say to the student, do you hear those words that they're saying? You know this word, or are you hearing them say, "What's wrong with you? Are you thick or something?" Now, I know that feeling because I lived it, but it's quite exciting when these students turn around and go, "I feel that all the time when people read with me." Now, we've been taught strategies for helping readers learn to read, and some of these strategies are very complex, and when the brain is getting anxious, they have very little chance of making inroads. So I'm going to give you a little snapshot overview of reading and the different approaches, and what I like to do is take the eyes out of all three main approaches to reading, and I'll come to that in a minute. But the big thing for students is that when they're reading, it should be fun. It should be gaining a story or meaning or something that adds to their worth. So it shouldn't be a negative experience. Secondly, the tone of your voice when you're speaking, not just the words, is so important. Okay, now a snapshot overview of reading. And I've got this in some reading notes that I'm going to make available through a Google Doc to everyone just before. It's only literally 4 pages long, 3 pages long. So I've tried to compress years and years of experience into the keys, the real story. So I'll make these notes available. So what I've tried to do is pull together the 3 main reading approaches to learning to read. Okay, now I know this is normally for younger students, but it's not uncommon for grade 3, 4, 5 boys and girls to be really struggling with reading comprehension, or really struggling their way through a text. Parents, when I work with them in distance ed and families, the parent will often say, "Oh no, my boy can read." And they're reading, they call it reading, but really what the student is doing is reading through the sentence. And they are decoding. So I'm acting that out a bit silly there, but they're decoding. They're not really reading for meaning. Okay, they're reading for decoding the words. They've never broken through into other words. In other words, they've never broken through into what reading should all be about, gaining meaning and learning from that experience. So what I've done is said, let's look at the 3 different reading approaches and let's pick the eyes out of all of them. Now the 3 main reading approaches they used to call it the 20-year reading debate in New Zealand. So you had teachers trained under universities that promoted, or gurus that promoted initially phonics. Now phonics is our base and our backstop, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But not the complicated phonics. So when we talk about teaching through phonics, we're talking about A is for apple, and so the emphasis of the sound is on the letter sound, not the name of the letter. When we're teaching alphabet at those young ages, when we are reading, we are going, oh, there's that sound again, th, okay, or oh, e sound. We talk about that. But the reading of the early readers, and hopefully you've got access to some good early readers if your children are on those, they need to have meaning in them, and they need to be a common text pattern. There are a lot of readers, which I won't name the brands, but some of them are what I called fat cat, mat, bat, sat readers. No one on earth talks that way. Now, if you're talking about Dr. Seuss, that's different. That guy was a genius at doing rhyming pattern books, but they were engaging and they were fun and they were zany. Well, I'm talking about these early readers where kids are learning to read the words because they all rhyme with at. It's a little bit corny and a little bit cheesy, and often the writing of these books involves a speech pattern that no one would ever follow or use in real life. So it makes it very hard for the children to anticipate what word is coming next. Okay, so you need meaning-based readers that are simple text patterns. And the phonics is still there, and you might draw attention to phonics, but you might do it after you've read it. Or if you pause on a word they're stuck on, you might sound the initial sound and model that for them. But you wouldn't labour them through sounding out a word. You just simply help them with the word. They're gonna get it, okay? Just get it onto it and enjoying the story. So yes, phonics are important, but these phonics patterns and programs that have 25 vowel sounds or 27, honestly, I don't think these things save a lot of kids. I think what they do is make it more occasion to experience anxiety. They're making it more complex. Our second approach to reading, which is called look and say. You just look at it and you say it. Post. I just see the word post over there on the side of a box. I didn't even read the word. I just recognise the shape of that word and that it's in red, and I've seen it so many times I just know it's post. Look and say is the second strategy. So when you're looking at a word and the kid just knows the word, that is how we read as adults. And that's sort of like the second phase of teaching reading that came in New Zealand for a while there, and a lot of countries. And it was where kids were just going to learn to read by just simply looking at it and saying it. And that on its own did fail lots and lots of students. So you still need the phonics backstop, but not the complicated phonics. And then the third thing that came out is called the whole language approach, and Queensland had a text maker breaker decoder thing, a similar variation. The third approach was the whole language approach, which was probably a hybridise of the two in a way, but it was building in this meaning concept. So when you're reading the sentence, the boy ran down to the shop to buy something with bar, it's of course buy, a bottle of milk or whatever. So buy, it's obvious the next word is buy, and you know that from the sound and the context. So that's an example of whole language. You pause and you help them sound the first sound, and they just guesstimate what the word is. And that's how we ourselves read as adults, where we are stuck on a word anyway. So those are the three approaches, but what I'm suggesting, I've got in my reading notes for you there that we'll make available, is that different words suit different attack strategies. Okay, so some words, if you wanted to sound them out phonetically, you'd need to know 200 rules, literally hundreds of rules, and very complicated different vowel sounds and things like this. So a word like that might be better suited to a just simply look and say. Another word might sound out beautifully, but if you try to just look and say it, it's confusing because it has some, it's not a common word or something like that they've seen very often and a bit longer. So in that case, sounding the parts out might work really well. And other times, just what word makes sense in that place in the sentence, and you prompt them with that. Okay, so these reading notes have those three main approaches. They also cover pause, prompt, praise, which is generally universally accepted as a good way to work with readers when you're hearing them read. They're stuck on a word, you pause, give them a chance to do a strategy themselves to work it out, and then you prompt them, and then you praise them. And you praise them either way, good try or well done. It's not, oh, you didn't get that right. It's not going to help them learn. If they've had a good go at it but didn't get it right, you go, good try. Because trying and having a go, if kids lose confidence to have a go, then it's all over. That's very important there, the pause, prompt, praise, and I've got notes on that. What I do suggest though is that where you've got a reader that's struggling with anxiety, I would not pause, prompt, praise at all. I'd just simply tell them the word. And in fact, I'd explain to the student that you've learnt that if they're looking at the word and they are hearing the sound of the word by you helping them and saying it, it's as powerful as them reading it themselves. In their head, they're seeing the picture of the word, they're seeing the letters in the word, and they're hearing the sound of the word. And that's often why you get these kids where they just seem to, the parent would say, oh, they just learned to read when they were 3-4 years old. They just learned by magic. If you actually research a lot of those students, you'll find that their mother or grandparent was a teacher and they read to them from prenatal or birth, So they were used to seeing the words and they just got it. And that's how a lot of my children learned to read. One of them who did have a speech challenge when he was very young, reading didn't come till later, and we had to teach him these different decoding strategies, but we didn't let him get entrenched in complicated phonics, especially when the phonics is so dependent on the linguistic sounds of the words, and if you're struggling with gaining speech in that way, then to be able to transfer that into reading will obviously be chaotic. It'll just be infinitely more complicated. So, and he moved on to chapter books when he was 8 years old. I'm very proud of him. He'll knock off a couple of chapter books in a weekend. So we don't need to think because a child is a little bit behind their reading that they're going to be behind for life. I'm now quite an advanced reader, but I wasn't once, obviously. So don't feel like you've got to catch kids up with their reading overnight. But you will find if kids have been avoiding reading in school, like I said, those strategies for avoiding or getting out of reading, doing what I call eye pass over reading. Their eyes are going over it, but nothing's happening. It's just an activity they do to wait for the morning tea bell to ring. And in a big class size, often they don't get caught up with. So when they're with you, you can turn that around. So in those reading notes, you'll find more details on that. The last thing I want to say is the best thing that will help your children with reading is not getting caught up with the reading debate of phonics versus whole language or phonics versus look and say. Like I said, different words suit different decoding strategies. But I would ask you to avoid getting caught up in the complicated phonics. That does really cause problems for a lot of children. In fact, I think there's a direct correlation between those systems and the number of dyslexic children we're coming through, as we've seen different states or governments or countries move down those tracks and then regress to another one, and the patterns are there. You don't have time to find these patterns, so please take my advice, get into those notes, and I'll put some second notes available that actually explain how to share an early reader, how do you sit. Likewise, when you're sharing a chapter book, make sure that you are not afraid to read a paragraph or even a third of the content on the pages, and modelling that reading for the student of fluency. And if they're following it, it's as powerful as them reading themselves for learning to read. It's absolutely brilliant. Getting good content and good books that grab their attention as well, without resorting to zombies and rubbish. Get good quality literature. Thank you for listening. It's so important.